Our next mate is called the Pillsbury mate, and this mate is actually very closely related to the windmill tactic. So for those people who don't know what the windmill tactic is, I'll give an example right here. So in this position, it seems like black has a lot more pieces than white does. He's up like a queen, a knight, and caught it like 4 pawns. So it seems like black's doing a lot better. However, white has this nice diagonal here. His bishop's lined up against black's king, and he's got this discover check ready to go. So let's see what white can do with this discover check. Well, if you just move something like rook to g3, then black can play the move f6, and everything's going to be fine. After f6, black is going to convert his material advantage and eventually win the game. The problem is, white can actually take some material immediately. So let's see what if he does something like rook takes f7. Okay, so white did win a pawn, but that's not really significant considering he's down a queen. So let's see. Black can only play the move king g8. Of course, if e5, then this is the same thing. So black can only play the move king to g8 here. And now, do we take another pawn? Well, we win 2 pawns, right? Is that a good idea? So no, it's not a good idea, because after taking 2 pawns here, once again, black is up so much material here that the 2 pawns is not really significant at all. For example, he can play the move right now, queen to b1 check, and now after giving a check, black eventually will activate all his pieces and use this extra material to win the game. Instead, here white has an in-between move. White would like to use this discover check again, so he can play the move rook to g7 check, and after black plays the move king to h8, white can take on e7 with the same discover check, like this. So this time white took the pawn, but the difference is that black's in check, so he must respond to that. After king to g8, then we give check again, and he has to go back. The point is that the king can only shuffle between these 2 squares, and he's low on squares, leading to white being able to use this tactic over and over again. So of course, white can give checkmate right now, for example, rook to g3 check, which gives mate, and this is the basis of Pillsbury mate. However, I want to show that if white wants to take most of black's pieces, he can also do so by repeating this pattern, taking the bishop with check, and coming back, and then taking the pawn with check, and then taking the queen. So white can also take all of black's pieces almost, and get a drawn position. However, like I said, the best move here would have been simply to play the move something like rook to g3, giving checkmate, and ending the game immediately for white. In this real game example, the material is equal. White has a bishop for a knight, and white's king safety seems actually slightly worse in this queen pawn endgame. So it seems like, position's about equal. However, it turns out that white has this nice battery here lined up against black's king. So only if he can somehow use that, it would be nice. However, black also has his threats of his own. Black is threatening to take on f3 with his queen, and he can also activate his pieces later on, taking advantage of white's poorly placed king. So white must strike fast here and make sure he defends the f3 pawn while making his move. The correct move here is therefore queen takes f6. After queen takes f6, we're threatening checkmate here, so black really has one option: take back the queen. Of course, he can try something else, but keep in mind that white already took a knight, so white already has a huge material advantage, and black doesn't really have a great way of stopping this checkmate on g7 either. So probably the best move for black is just to take on f6, practically. And after white plays the move rook to g1 check, black's king is forced in the corner, so the rook is cutting off black's king from the g-file, and in the corner, after bishop takes f6, it's checkmate. In our final example, we see that black's king is also very exposed, and here there seems to be a lot going on in the position as well. So we can't play the move something like rook to g3 first, because after this check, we do see that the king can't go anywhere. The problem is that after this check, not only can black play f6 to stop the check, he can also play knight takes b2, simply winning the bishop. So here probably can't be the bishop that gives checkmate, since the bishop is actually being threatened right now. If you move something like bishop to, I don't know, well, the bishop can't even go anywhere, bishop to c3 maybe? If you move bishop to c3, it's too slow. Black can stop this threat by playing the move f6 immediately. So instead, what white needs to do here is actually sacrifice his rook to begin with. So instead, white should play the move rook to g8, giving double check. So the bishop gives check, and the rook gives check. The king here must move, and the only square it can move to is by taking the rook. This time, we can play the move rook to g1 check, taking advantage of the fact that the bishop here is controlling this entire diagonal. So after rook to g1 check, the king has nowhere to go, and the only thing for black to do is to play queen g5, leading to rook takes g5, checkmate. Though Pillsbury's mate requires some preparation getting the king opened, and with the bishop in the line, such as that, it can be a very useful tool, and the windmill tactic is something you want to keep in mind as well.